I've got a question for you. If you found your dream home tomorrow and it was listed for £325,000, how much would you offer for it? And if you've already got a number in your head right now, you've just made the exact same mistake that thousands of buyers make every single year when trying to buy their first home. And I'm going to be completely honest with you, it's totally understandable because no one really teaches you how to decide what a property is really worth. And I started thinking about making this video when I started seeing all these videos crop up on Instagram, YouTube from gurus on how to properly negotiate a house purchase. And I noticed a trend: for below asking, don't show emotions, be prepared to walk away, never offer your maximum. And some of that advice can absolutely be useful. But I kept on asking myself one question: how do I actually decide what to offer on a property? Because here's the problem: you can tell someone to offer below asking price, but how far below? You can tell someone to walk away from a purchase, but when? You can certainly tell someone to negotiate confidently, but how do they know what the real value of that house is? And that was the moment I realized buyers don't need more negotiation tactics. I think buyers need a real way of thinking, a framework, something that you can use on any property, whether the market is falling, rising, or somewhere in between. So instead of making another video on clever phrases to use or secret negotiation tricks, I thought we'd build an actual framework together. And by the end of this video, every single one of these circles are going to answer one question. And I think you should have the answer to every single one of these questions before you ever make an offer on a property. And here's the really important bit here. I'm not asking you to copy my offer. I'm not asking you to memorize a script. And I'm definitely not asking you to negotiate how some property guru told you to negotiate. I'm trying to help you build enough knowledge so when you find a property that you're really interested in, you have the ability to go off and build your own offer with confidence. Because the strongest negotiators don't make the strongest offer, they make better decisions. And once you understand that, negotiations become a lot less scary. And I want to make it crystal clear here that these tactics work on any purchase price in the UK, whether it's 150,000 to way beyond £1 million. This framework has been used by so many of my buyers, and the price has nothing to do with the success rate. I'm Joseph, but you can call me Joe, and I'm slightly obsessed with making the complicated parts of buying a home simple. I'm a mortgage and protection advisor here in the UK, and every single week I am back on this channel making videos for you guys explaining one part of the buying process and how we can make it that little bit easier, and maybe saving you some time and money in the process. So let's start with the most important question first. What is the house actually worth? Because until we get that answer, we're not negotiating, we're just guessing. And I honestly think this is almost where every single negotiation starts in the wrong place. So let me ask you another question. What does that number actually tell us? Does it tell us the house is worth £325,000? No. Does it tell us that's what the estate agent is going to accept? No. Does that tell us what we should be offering on the property? No. So what does that number even tell us? The seller hopes to achieve £325,000. And I genuinely think that single mindset shift can save buyers thousands of pounds. Because an asking price isn't a valuation, it isn't a private survey, it's not even an agreement. It's, put simply, the seller's starting position. So if we don't negotiate from the asking price, what do we negotiate from? Well, the answer here is simple: evidence. And that is why this first section matters so much to anyone looking to buy a house. Because before we even think about making an offer, we need to build a picture. And the picture needs to show us exactly what the house is actually worth. If a nearly identical house on the same street sold for £305,000 just 3 months ago, that tells us something. And if another one almost identical on the same street again sold for £310,000 6 months ago, that again tells us something. And if every single similar property sold between £305,000 to £315,000, suddenly that asking price on the property that we're looking at for £325,000 looks a lot different. Now, let's be clear, that doesn't automatically mean that our house that we're looking at is overpriced. It might have a bigger garden, a nicer kitchen, nicer bathrooms, bigger bedrooms. It could even have an extension or even better parking. So let's be crystal clear here. Comparisons don't give you the answer, they give you a realistic range. And negotiating becomes much easier when you're working with a realistic range instead of an emotional number tied to a number that a seller's decided to put on their listing. Now let's add another piece of evidence into the mix. If a property went live yesterday and it already has 15 viewings booked for the upcoming weekend, you're probably negotiating in a very different position to somebody viewing a house that has been sat on the market for 4 months and hasn't had someone go out there for the last 2 months. Let's be very clear here. Time doesn't automatically mean the seller will accept less. But what it should tell you is the current asking price hasn't persuaded the current market. And then I look for this. One reduction doesn't necessarily mean the seller's desperate, but it does tell you something. They've already changed their strategy once, and that is valuable information. So you should start noticing what's happening here. We still haven't made an offer, and yet we know far more about any property that we're individually looking at than we did just 5 minutes ago because we're doing the research. That's the exact point I'm trying to draw here. Great offers are built, they're not guessed. Because I've seen buyers offer the asking price within 5 minutes of going to view a property. And the main reason they did that because that was out of fear of losing the property. And I've seen the other side. I've seen where buyers spend 20, 30, 40 minutes researching a property, researching the area and looking at comparables. Then they can confidently offer 10, maybe £15,000 less, sometimes more, because they understand the true value of the home. And no, it's not because they're better negotiators. It's because they built up better evidence. So now, in my opinion, we've answered our first question. What is the house actually worth? Not perfectly, and that's okay. Because let's be honest, negotiating isn't about finding the exact value. It's about reducing uncertainty. And now that we've actually started doing that, we can move on to the next question. And I actually think this one is more important than the first question. Why is the seller actually selling? Because two identical houses can require completely different negotiations. So let's imagine two identical houses, House A and House B. These houses are completely identical, same street, same size, same condition, same asking price. So here's my question, would you make the same offer on both properties? The answer is probably no. And the reason isn't the house, it's the person selling it. And this is where the negotiations become a little bit less about the property and a little bit more about the person selling it. So let's look at a few examples. Seller one could be downsizing. They've already found somewhere to move. They've lived there for 20 years and they want to move in the next 3 months. Could they accept a lower offer if it gave them certainty? Possibly. But notice, I didn't say they definitely would, but it definitely starts a conversation. Seller 2 could be in probate. Now imagine the property's come through probate, the family has no intention of ever living there. That doesn't automatically mean they'll accept a lower offer on the property, but it may mean that they value a smooth, reliable buyer, more than squeezing out every single pound that they possibly can from the property. Seller 3, now imagine something completely different. They've found their dream home and they are desperate not to lose it. And suddenly a buyer who's ready can become incredibly valuable to someone in this situation. But now let's flip it. Let's look at what seller 4 could look like. Just testing the market. They don't need to move, they're not in a rush, and they are simply seeing what they could get for their home. And unfortunately, these sellers do exist. Now your negotiations look completely different. They have no pressure, no deadlines, and no urgency. And that changes your expectations. Notice what we've just done. We still haven't discussed what words to use on your offer. We still haven't discussed how to make your offer. We're simply trying to understand the situation that we're dealing with. So naturally, the next question becomes, how do I find this out? And the good news is you don't need some secret source to find all this information from. Most of the time, you just need to ask, why are they moving? Have they found somewhere? Are they in a chain? And what is their ideal timescale? And here's something I'd encourage every single buyer to do. Don't ask these questions to catch the seller out. Ask it so you can really understand what matters to them. Because if you understand the seller's priorities, you can build a better offer, not necessarily a higher one. And that is why two identical houses can have two completely different offers. So now we've answered our first two real questions here. What is it worth and why are they selling? But let's be honest, neither of those actually tell us if we have any negotiating power whatsoever. So the next question is, do I have any negotiating power? Because sometimes the answer is no. Now I've reached the question where I think most buyers get it wrong. They assume every property can be negotiated, but that's simply not true. Sometimes you'll go into a property and you have genuine negotiating power. And sometimes the seller holds all the cards. And the real skill here is understanding what situation you're in before making an offer. These two houses look identical, same street, same price, same layout. But let's reveal one extra bit of information for you. House A, listed yesterday, 15 viewings booked and 2 offers already received. House B, listed 142 days ago, price reductions twice and no offers accepted on the property. Has the house changed? No. So what's changed? Your negotiating power. And that's why I don't think you negotiate against the property. You negotiate around the situation surrounding it. Every property starts somewhere on this scale, and it's your job to work out who has more leverage. And there are a few factors that we can use to actually work this out. Factor 1 is how many buyers. If you're competing against 5 serious buyers, you probably don't have much negotiating power. If you viewed a property that's been sitting there quietly on the market for 4 or 5 months, it's probably a different conversation, and the power kind of falls back in your favor. Factor number 2 is time pressure. Who feels the pressure? The seller or you? If your tenancy ends in 2 weeks and the seller knows about that, they now may have more leverage than you. If the seller needs to move quickly and you're happy to wait, that balance does start to shift. And there are so many examples of how the balance here can shift either way, but this is just one of them. And a little side tip here, when you're viewing properties or on the phone to estate agents, they're going to be asking you a lot of questions. Now, again, I really encourage having relationships with estate agents, even if it is just professional. But when they're being friendly, asking you a lot of personal questions about your situation, that's not to help you. Remember, the estate agent works for the seller, so any information you accidentally volunteer to them, they could potentially use that against you to shift the favor back into the seller's court. Factor 3 here is alternatives. This is the question that almost nobody asks. Who needs this deal more? Is there 10 other similar properties, similar spec within your budget? If there is, you've got options. Or if this is the only suitable property you've seen for the last 6 months, then suddenly that changes things. Because let's be crystal clear, negotiations become harder when you don't believe or know that you don't have any other options. And one of the biggest mistakes that I see all the time is buyers walking into negotiations trying to appear in control, but they hadn't actually worked out if they had any leverage on this property and on the seller at all. And let me make it crystal clear, confidence does not create leverage. Because when you know you're only one of 2 buyers, the property has been reduced in price twice, and the seller wants to move very quickly, you don't need to pretend to be confident. You already know where you stand. Now let's look at the framework because it's starting to build into something here. We know what the property's worth, roughly, we have a good range. We understand why the seller is moving and their motivations. And now we can assess how much negotiating power we actually have on a property. But there's still one huge piece of missing information here that needs to be factored in. Because let's imagine you've looked at these 3 steps and you've managed to negotiate a fantastic purchase price. And then you instruct a private survey, and that private survey comes back to you in the form of a report. So should you have negotiated before the survey or after it? Because the answer to that question could save you thousands of pounds. I want you to imagine something here. We've got the timeline, we've got our viewing, offer accepted, survey completion. Obviously, there's a couple of details out there, but you get the point. Most buyers think all the negotiations happen right before here. They make an offer, it gets accepted, and they think, great, the negotiations are over. You don't have to worry about that anymore. But what if I told you the most valuable negotiations sometimes haven't even happened yet? This is where buyers can save thousands of pounds without playing games or even trying clever negotiation tactics. Once your offer is accepted, you've agreed a price. But that price is based on everything you know about the property at that moment. But then a private survey gives you new information. And let's be honest here, new information can justify a new conversation. That is a massive difference to just asking for money off simply because you can. So let's say that you've agreed £315,000 for your property. The survey comes back and highlights the roof is reaching the end of its life expectancy, there's signs of damp in the property, and there's a recommendation for a further investigation on whether there is structural movement in the property. Now you need to ask yourself a very real question. Would you have known any of that information when viewing the property before making your first offer? No, of course not. So are you changing your offer because you're trying to negotiate harder? No, you've changed it because the information has changed. New evidence creates new conversations. So what should you do? First step is to read the report. The second step is to understand the findings on the report. And the third step is to work out how much the repairs are going to cost for anything found on the report. And this is where a lot of buyers make another mistake, and it's so easy to do. So don't worry if you've made this mistake or potentially fall into this trap. They read the survey, they panic, and immediately ask for a ballpark figure, let's say £10,000 off. But the problem here is they've asked that without knowing the true costs of the things that need to be repaired. And what you should be doing is treat it like every other bit of evidence that we've used in this video. If the survey mentions damp, get a quote for how much it might cost to repair. If it mentions the roof, speak to a roofer about the potential costs there. If it reveals you need a further investigation, understand what the further investigation is that's required and understand the potential costs of that. Because you're trying to work out the financial impact, not guessing it. So notice something here, we haven't guessed the property's value. We didn't guess the seller's motivation. We definitely didn't guess our own negotiating power for any given property. So why on earth would we guess with costs of repairs? Every good decision in this framework starts with evidence. So when is it reasonable to renegotiate a purchase price? New evidence, unexpected defects with the property, genuine repair costs required, and information unavailable when viewing a property. Notice what's missing there? I just want it cheaper, because estate agents, sellers, and even surveyors see that difference very, very quickly. So now we've answered 4 questions: worth, motivation, leverage, and survey timing. But here's the question: what does the seller really care about? I think this might be one of the biggest misconceptions for most first-time buyers when negotiating a house purchase. Most buyers truly believe the one question a seller has is how much are they offering? Sometimes that can be true, but almost all the time there are other components at play here. Because from the seller's perspective, accepting an offer isn't the finish line. It's the beginning of a process that could take 3, 4, maybe even 5 months. Let's imagine you're selling your house for a minute and you've received 2 offers from 2 different buyers. Which one of these would you accept? Most people would instantly jump to the 320,000 higher amount. But at this situation, you've only been given one piece of the puzzle. Buyer A has no agreement in principle, a house to sell, solicitors not instructed at all, and wants to complete in 6 months' time. Buyer B has their agreement in principle ready, they're completely chain-free, they have their solicitors ready, and they're completely flexible on when they need to complete, whatever fits the seller's timeline. So which buyer would you choose now? Sellers don't just accept offers, sellers choose buyers. And once you understand that, you stop asking, how can I offer less? And you start asking, how can I become the strongest buyer? And there's actually 6 different checkboxes that we can tick here to become the strongest buyer. Number 1 is an agreement in principle. If you've already got an agreement in principle in place, you're showing the seller that you've already spoken to a mortgage advisor or a bank about your position. Number 2 is chain position. If you're chain free, that is one less thing very valuable to a seller that they don't have to worry about. Number 3 is solicitor ready. If you've already chosen your solicitor, you are essentially showing the seller that you are ready to move. Number 4 is deposit ready. If your deposit is already available, the seller knows that you're unlikely to cause any unnecessary delays waiting for funds. Number 5 is communication. This one almost no one talks about, because if you disappear for 4 days every time someone asks a question, that's going to create uncertainty. But buyers who reply quickly, supply documents quickly when asked for, keeping everyone updated, that makes the seller feel confident. And obviously you're going to have limited opportunities to do this at the start, but wherever you have an opportunity to reply quickly, do so, because it's going to give the seller that little bit more confidence. And number 6, and this is a really big one, is flexibility. If the seller needs another 2 weeks, can you work with that? If they need to complete slightly sooner, can you adapt to that? So sometimes flexibility is worth more than £2,000. So now we can build a bigger picture about our buying position and how we are stronger than the other potential buyers. And we don't even have to talk about numbers. If you've scored 6 out of 6 on this section, then brag about it. And the way you can do that is on your offer email. Tell the seller that you're mortgage ready. Tell them that you're chain free. Tell them that you've got your solicitor ready and you've got the evidence for your deposit readily available as and when it needs to be requested. Evidence your ability to communicate, and finally make it crystal clear that you are in a position where you can make the seller's timescale work absolutely fine and you're flexible there. So notice what happened when we look at the whole framework now. We started thinking negotiation was about what to say, but every section has moved us further away from those words and closer to preparation. Because remember, preparation creates confidence. Confidence creates trust. And let's be honest here, trust gets deals over the line. Not every single time, but more often than just clever negotiation lines. So imagine you're the seller. You've got two buyers offering almost the same amount. So who are you trusting with one of your biggest assets? And that's the buyer that you need to become. Because there's one question we still haven't really answered. How much is too much? And when should I walk away? And this might be the most important decision you make in the entire buying process. We've looked at the market, we understand the seller. We know how much negotiating power that we actually have. We used the private survey properly, and we've made ourselves the strongest buyer we can possibly be. So now we've arrived at the hardest question. I think this one decision can save buyers more money than every negotiation tactic that we've discussed in this video. Because the biggest mistake I see buyers making isn't offering too low. It's falling in love with the property too early. Because the moment you emotionally decide this is the house that I want to live in, you've already given away or thrown away a lot of the negotiation power that you potentially held. Because now at this point, if you fall in love with a house, every single decision starts becoming about keeping the house, not necessarily making the right decision. So before I make my first offer, there's always a number that I write down. This number never changes because of emotions. It will only change if new evidence comes to light. Think about what we've built: worth, seller, leverage, survey, your position. All of that leads to one maximum purchase price. Not the number that you hope to pay, the most you can honestly justify paying for that property. Most buyers only think about the first offer they're going to make, but experienced buyers already know the top step. They know where they'll stop. And here's why that changes everything. Imagine you've decided your maximum is going to be $315,000. You offer $305,000. The seller says no, and they come back and say it's $320,000. You say no, and they say fine. Well, let's agree to $318,000. Now you're no longer making an emotional decision. You're simply asking, does this fit inside the framework? No? Then you politely walk away. And I think this sentence summarizes the entire video. The best negotiators don't win every property. They avoid buying the wrong ones. And sometimes the smartest offer you'll ever make is no offer at all. So now I ask you to think back to the start of the video. I asked you what offer you'd make on this property here. If I asked you that same question now, I don't think you'd just give me a number. You'd start asking, what are the comparable sales? Why are they moving? How much leverage do I have? What does the survey say? What sort of buyer am I? That is exactly what I hoped this framework would do, not only for this property that we're theoretically talking about, but also the ones that you're going to be looking at by yourself. So we haven't built a negotiation script, we've built a decision-making framework. And the beautiful thing about that is you can use it on every single property that you view. So let's finally answer the question we started this video with. How do we actually build the first offer? So we've finally reached the point where most negotiation videos actually start. They tell you what to offer, but now you know something that most buyers don't know. You know why. Notice something. The offer isn't coming from emotion, and it's definitely not coming from guesswork. It isn't coming from what the estate agent said. It isn't even coming from what I hope the seller will accept. It's coming from evidence. So comparable sales tells me what's reasonable for the price. Seller's motivation, this tells me what might matter to the seller. Negotiating power, this tells me how ambitious I can really be about this offer being accepted. Survey, this tells me if anything has changed and the purchase price or the offer needs to be amended later down the line. And the buyer strength, this tells me how attractive my offer really is. And that's why someone else looking at the exact same property could quite reasonably arrive at a different offer. Because negotiations isn't about finding a magic number. It's about building a number you can justify. Think back to the start of the video when I asked, what would you offer? And if I'm honest, at that point in the video, you couldn't answer because you didn't have the evidence. But right now, you've built a framework that you can use on every single property. And that's the difference. We have not learned how to negotiate one house. We have learned how to evaluate every house. And I really hope that that is a skill that you're going to continue using for the rest of your life whenever it comes to buying property. But here's the reality. No two buyers are the same. Your income's different, your deposit's different, the mortgage lender you end up with is likely different, and the strategy that works for someone else may not work for you. So if you're serious about buying your first home and you'd like someone to apply this very framework to your own situation, I'd love to help. I left a link in the video description where you can access my online calendar. That's going to show you available days and times that are available to you and available with me, and we can book in a call and go through anything and everything together. We can look at your budget, your deposit, your mortgage options, and we can build a personalized plan that works best with you to enable you to buy with confidence. No pressure, no obligation, just honest advice based on your situation. And I'm going to leave you with one final thought. The goal was never to negotiate the cheapest house price, because saving £5,000 on the wrong house is still a bad decision, but paying the right price for the right house can be the best decision you'll ever make. And if this video helps you feel even the slightest bit more confident, then I've achieved exactly what I hoped for. Now, I've got a video on your screen right now where I'm going to be looking at what market is better for you, whether it's the high rates or low rates. Click on the video because I think you're going to be really interested to see which market can benefit you the most. I'll see you there.